We're continuing our interview with Mr. Herbert Scherer, and he's in Van Cleek Hill, Ontario, Canada, and it is November 16th, 2020. So I had some more questions for you based on your book and what you were talking to me about last time. You mentioned something very interesting about you had a much better chance of surviving in the camp if you had a friend or buddy. So can you explain to us why that was the case?
Well, it was morally, you had somebody, you live with. You cannot live with 800 people. You have to have somebody who, you can trust. And so I had a few very good friends, and we talked about at home. I knew his family, his wife, and everything. Then on the end, because I was an anti-Bolshevik, they sent my friends home.
Okay.
And left me there. And then I made another friend from Bavaria. I worked with him about 2 years, and they sent him home too.
Oh.
And they left me alone. But then finally they sent me home after 4.5 years.
Now, did you stay in touch with those friends of yours after the war, after you got home?
I didn't have the address and nothing, but my wife, when I worked in Saudi Arabia, after coming home a few years, from here out, I went to Saudi Arabia. My wife picked me up in Frankfurt and she called Huber Hans. She tried to find him, the last friend I had from Bavaria. And his son said he bought a house in Spain. He liked it there very much, and he died there. Why he died, I have no idea.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about the relationship the prisoners had with the Soviet guards?
With the Soviet guards, we had not much trouble. These were young guys with a long gun and a bayonet on it, and they brought us from the camp to the factory. So we had to march 5 in a row, and they counted. So they counted every 2 lines were 10. And then we said, let's go and stand there in a six people beside. So they counted, there were suddenly 5 guys missing. And I said, whoa, they put the head in the back because they start to sweat. And he said, okay, now count again. I said to him, count again. And we went blub, 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 blub in 5.
Okay. So you like so you would, as we say in English, you'd screw with their heads, right? With the Soviet guards, you'd play games with them like that.
One guard came to the Utilzech. There was a saw and stuff, to work on wood. He watched me to go with a big board through the saw, and he said, hey, I want to do that, the next one. He said, you cannot do it. He said, yeah, I can do it. And he had to go into the saw, but he had one hand here.
Oh, no.
If he goes this way, 1 millimeter, it comes back. He said, watch. And he went, poof. It hit him right in the face. He fell down, was full of blood here. And next day he came, he had a whole head. It was one bandage, but he was still smiling. He was cutting wood.
Right. That's not that story is not in your book, so that's good.
Yeah.
Did you ever see in your 4.5 years non-German POWs? Did you ever see, for example, any Romanians or Hungarians or Italians?
There were Italians in one camp, there were Romanians in the second camp, and there were all kinds of people. Yeah, there were all kinds of people.
So were these camps right next to yours?
No, that was within the camp. They slept in a different barrack.
Okay, so within the single camp, then you would have Germans, Romanians, Italians, and others.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever talk to any of those guys?
Oh, yeah, but we had very little to say to each other.
So was that a language problem, or just there wasn't anything to talk
No,
about?
but Romanians, they kept absolute to them. They didn't want to have nothing to do with us, and we had no friendships with Romanians.
Okay. What about
there were some German Romanians, some German Romanians there, because there are some German towns and villages in Romania.
Right.
And I know one man, and he had to transport the bread ration to the camp in a box, a sled that was a sleigh, and there was a big box on it with a round roof. And he put the bread in there, from the bread, so many loaves. And then he came to the camp. He was practically free. I think he talked fairly good Russian. Where he learned it, I don't know, but he talked good German with me. We were practically friends. Him and me, we were friends. We never met. We met only a few times. But whenever I saw him, oh, Scherer, and he was waving. And one night I came out of the banya where we had 2 liter water to wash without soap, without towel. And we outside was very cold. And it was night. There were a 60 bulb here, and 50 yards further was a 60 bulb there. Hard anything to see, but it was snow. You could see where you were going. And he said, "Guten Abend, Scherer." That means good evening, Scherer. And then he was gone. And he slept in a private kolkhoz, in a private little village, which Stalin allowed to be because he wanted to see if his kolkhoz State Farm produces more than them, or the other way. And so he slept there, and he never came to the camp, only to unload the bread.
Okay.
And then he was gone, and I think he took the bread, enough bread to keep people quiet, all on his way. He ran away from Siberia, and if he survived the trip to Romania or to Austria, I never knew. Usually, the Russians, if they catch somebody who ran away, they brought it back to the same camp to show us it's no use to run away. But he never came back.
Now, do you remember any examples of prisoners stealing food from other prisoners, or the Soviet? Yeah. Oh yeah, and what would happen? I mean, would fights break out? What would happen? Did that ever happen to you?
Well, one day I was sitting on the table, and there was a guy from Berlin. He was a real criminal. He came before he went to the army. He was in a KZ, in a camp. He didn't know. He didn't accept any rule. He was sitting here, and there were 2 people sitting. Suddenly, the light went out, and I grabbed my bread. And the light went on after 5 minutes, and the man on the other side said, "Hey, my bread is gone." I said to him, I knew Kühne. His name was Kühne. I said, "Kühne, you took that bread." No. I called the guard here. The guard said, "Get up, get out." He went in his pocket. There was the bread. And the guard hit him with his gun. Poof! Hit him with a whole barrel over the head.
Wow. There was a story in your book about some Soviet guards stealing your food from the prisoners, and the commander did something. He shot the Soviet guards. Is that right?
No. on the way to Siberia, they took our bread, and on the way to Siberia, there are villages beside the Trans-Siberian Railway, and they took the bread to buy vodka. You know, they buy vodka with our bread.
Okay.
Maybe the guy who was an officer in front in the first wagon, he didn't see that, but the guard went with the guy with each wagon. He accompanied him, you know, he walked behind the man with the bread, and they took it out and put it in their pocket. And here was the villager standing there, and he bought vodka with it. And then when we came to Siberia, the officer in the camp said, "Why are you so run down? What was the reason?" And we said, "We got nothing to eat. We get very little to eat because the guards were stealing our bread." And he degraded, you know, he took the things from her shoulder and banged them right and left in the face, and he said, 5-year hard labor to you, 5-year hard labor to you, 5 year. Gave them 5-year hard labor, these guys.
Wow.
Because they treated us very, very bad. I mean, we lost 10% of the people. 60 people went in the train, and 600 people went in the train, and 500 only got to Tumen.
Wow.
They died just froze.
So how long was that trip?
Something like 15 days, because there came trains from Siberia to the west, and we were not important. They shoved us out, you know. Here we waited until, sometimes we waited an hour, sometimes 3 hours. So it went very, very slow. And then the locomotive had no wood anymore. We couldn't go on. Then the guys went out and cut wood in the forest, and brought it out. I didn't have to go. I was very happy I didn't have to go. The snow was that high just before the Ural Mountains.
Wow.
And they brought the wood out, and then they made a better fire. So the steam, that was a steam engine. And later we got electric engine with a line on top. Yeah. And that was much better. And that was horrible. And then I think I wrote also in the book that the door fell out, you know. I was sitting here on my haunches and leaned on the door, and this was east and this was west. And in the Ural Mountains, it must have been, I don't know, a deer or something, which our cart went poof, poof. And you know, the doors, these big doors, they had a hole here and one hole there. Because of this thing we went over, that jumped out, and boom, the whole door fell out. But it was very, very cold. All the people in this part had to go there, because otherwise they freeze in 1 hour, because the train was going and the icy cold wind went to them. Yeah. And then we took the boards they were sitting on and put it there, and we put our winter coats out and we hang it over there, so that we almost froze. Oh. Then when we came to Ural Mountains, they stopped and gave us some water out of the locomotive. And I enjoyed that water so good, just boiled water, hot. And I said, when I come home, I'm gonna boil water and drink as much as I want, you know. We stand in line, and the guy made, and everybody had some hot water, you know.
Wow.
But we were hungry, we had nothing to eat. And we had no wood to burn. There was a little stove in that kettle car, but they didn't give us wood, no matches, no nothing. And some guys said, Начальник, drova, you know. They said Meister to these guys, Master, give us wood. They were deaf to us. They couldn't care less.
Right. Wow. When you were in the camp, you were in several different camps. And I know probably no one was keeping records, but what do you think killed the most prisoners?
It was a disease caused by malnutrition.
Okay.
We were bones, brown skin with wrinkles, and we were 20 years old. We were starved. That's all. If you are starved, and especially the men with the big bones, they got right away tuberculosis, and that was the end of it. And because there was hardly any food, they died within a week or two. They were dead. That was galloping, you know.
Yeah. So it was much better to be a smaller person than a bigger person.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned in your book when you were, I think it was when you were still in the army, before you were a prisoner. I don't know if you were going back to Germany because you were wounded. There was a very interesting thing in your book where you said when you got to the German border, there were a lot of dead German soldiers and they unloaded them at the border. Can you tell us about that?
I went back to Germany because of a bullet through my leg. But the people had different injuries. So they loaded them all into this long train in Warsaw and brought them to Germany. And years ago, that was my garrison in Gumbin, East Prussia, and they unloaded them and buried them there.
Okay. Now, was the idea of doing that to prevent German civilians from seeing the large numbers of casualties? Was it sort of
No.
It just, that's what they did.
They brought still alive like me with the dead, and they were dying while we were going. And over this aisle there was a young man who, in my age, and he was saying nothing for hours, and then he went up and said, "No, Mama, no, I'm coming. No, it's the truth, I'm coming." And he talked with his mother, and he talked maybe 2 hours with his mother, and then he lied down and he was dead. He died, and that's it. There was, and the medic, he had a little bit food and a coffee, and he gave me the food and the coffee, and he said, "You're the only guy alive, so you want that stuff? Yes, bring it on a tray. I eat it all. I didn't eat for 3 days."
Wow.
So he brought me the food, and I was so happy.
And when you got home to recover from your wound, did people talk to you? Did they ask you questions about the Russian front? No, they didn't ask you anything.
No.
Okay.
They knew from years, of fighting, that they knew what was going in Russia.
Okay. Did you? I can't remember. You were captured in September 44, correct?
No, on July the 11th.
Okay. Now, of course, the Normandy landings had taken place maybe 5 weeks before. Did you notice that German troops on the Russian front were leaving to go west to deal with that, or was it too soon? Did you notice that at all?
No, we noticed that because Hitler made a big fault to take troops away from the Russian front and throw it against the Americans, because we rather have the Americans in our country than the Russians. I mean, nobody wanted to have the Russians in Western Europe.
Right.
And that's why I went to that front line to avoid that. Because if Stalin makes Western Europe his annexation, to Russia, we would have a lousy life, to look at. It would be just in Soviet Union, the guys with the pistol and said, get up and walk there and do no freedom anymore and nothing to eat anymore, very little to eat,
So you did. So in those few weeks, you did notice German troops leaving the front and heading west. You did notice. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so you were finally released in what it was 1948. Was it October? I can't remember. October 48.
Yeah, October. No.
How many weeks did it take your train to get back to Germany again?
Well, it took long time. I didn't count the days. It took a long time because the Russians they took material out of Germany. They put troops in, and it was back. We were not important, So we had to wait. Sometimes a day. I remember in Moscow, we were a whole day in Moscow, on some sideline, and there was we couldn't go ahead.
Did they feed you any better going home than they did going out?
No, if it would be, I would remember it, but I didn't. I think we got less on the way home than we got in the camp.
This would be very sad to survive Siberia, but did anybody die on the way home?
No, not that I know of.
Okay. That would be very sad to survive Siberia for 4 years and die on the train going home. Okay, now in when you got home, I know you mentioned in your book that you would spend months walking around the forests and so on. Can you tell me a little bit about your life in Germany after the war?
Well, you see, when we came back from Siberia in Poland, God said to me, now you go on to your country and you stay there a few years, and then you should go on to Canada. And I said, God, Canada, let me go home. What is in Canada? Where is it? Is there a cow I could milk?
Okay.
Is there an apple tree? What is there in Canada? I knew it was in North America, but we didn't know nothing about Canada. Then I went on and on with the thought in my head to Canada. Then my boss I worked for, furniture, who died here in Hawkesbury years ago, he said, I take all my machinery and I go to Canada. I said, well, that's it. He goes to Canada, I go to Canada.
Okay, so you went because he came.
No, I wanted to go. God said I should come here.
Okay.
And then so he took all his machinery, I worked somewhere else, and he went to Canada, and then he sent his wife back to Saarbrücken, and she met me and she said, my husband would need you there, because the people there, they know nothing about wood and machinery and all this. And about furniture. And I said, yeah, I wanted to go to Canada anyway. And that was before I got married. And then in the next May, I got married. And in June, I came here. But before that happened, my father took all the money from me I could make. So he kept me a slave. I was a slave at home. I couldn't move out and rent a room and sleep there even on the floor. I had no money. I had to pay the rent for that room. And my father gave, and then I met my wife.
What was her name? What was your wife's name?
Hildegard. Okay.
And she was also from Saarbrücken?
Yeah, she was from nearby. She came with a train on Sundays and we met and we walked a nice wood road which past my former soldier camp, you know, Kaserne, which is now university. We walked down there, and there was in the forest was a nice restaurant. We went there. I had only money to buy a coffee for Hildegard. I couldn't eat. All the people were eating. I'm not eating.
Huh.
And she went home and she ate the Frigidaire empty. And her mother said, well, is he not giving you anything to eat? And she said, look, Mom, he hasn't got any money. So, and it was a dreary time. It was, my father was very unjust, very, he was not like a father should be. He was really not a father. I met employers later here in Montreal and here in Hawkesbury. They were more father to me than my father ever was. He was not a friend. He was like an enemy. He was terrible. My sisters were nice. We always loved each other. And after the war too, but then my older sister had multiple sclerosis, and she was in a bed all the time. And I had then to leave to Canada. I couldn't even say goodbye to her.
Oh, wow. So was your father always like that, or was he like that only after you came back from Russia?
Yeah, after the war, he was very unjust. Yeah.
So before then he was okay, but afterwards, no.
Afterwards, no. When I worked half a year, well, I couldn't go to a doctor. The healthcare refused me. They said, you are not a member of the health plan,
Okay.
and we cannot do anything for you.
Okay.
So they refused me. They refused to examine me, and they refused to give me any medication. So I was all on my own. My father could pay 1 month for me, health care, and I could go and get examined and would get medication, and I would have been maybe okay, but he didn't do it. So, and I was penniless. So I walk in the forest. I knew the forest. The peace of the forest will make me healthy. And I walk all day from the morning 9 to when dark. It was November. And when it was dark, I walked out of the forest.
Wow.
And it was a dreary time. People were living, they were laughing, there was light, and there was music, and there was not for me. I had not, and that was not where I grew up. So I didn't know anybody there. I didn't know anybody. It was all a strange town, and it was a very difficult time, But when I was in the forest, I was not sad. The forest was always in my life a wonderful place, The trees didn't lie to me. The trees didn't tell me to do this and this. The trees were peaceful. And the animals in the forest were peaceful. And the brooks were splashing down. And I enjoyed nature. And I got healthier. My heart was still not very good, but my liver and my kidneys work now, and pump the water out of my body,
So what major health problems do you still have? Health problems from your time in Russia or not?
No, I couldn't say so.
Okay.
Maybe sometimes bugging me is to remember the injustices, in the camp, and the injustice of my fatherland to just ignore me when I came home, and my parents ignored me practically. There was no love coming my way, nothing.
Heard him say many times that re-entry was worse than war and Siberia put together. To him, re-entry was the worst part of it all because of the lack of support, love, community,
Right.
and to the point where he was actually suicidal.
Really? Okay. So,
Yeah.
it's interesting because a lot of the veterans I talk to, some of them, they do still have some health problems, especially if they were prisoners of the Japanese, but more so mental. They have, I guess, I don't know what they call it in Canada here. It's PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Nobody talked about that in Germany. Nobody.
Okay. But do you feel that you had that when you look back at that time? Do you feel like you had that problem?
Well, at one point, yes, because at one point I decided to commit suicide.
What stopped you?
I was about 100 meters from the street, just to walk out. It was on a Friday evening, and it was almost dark. And I decided on Saturday, I don't do it on Sunday because my sisters are at home, and it's a little bit nice at home with the sisters. But on Monday, I will do it. But then I said, I have to have a rope. I haven't got a gun, so I need a rope to hang myself. And where do I get the money for the rope? I had no money, not a penny in my pocket.
So you could not commit suicide because you were broke.
No, not that. That was not the reason. I went. When I said that, on this point, I saw a face on my right side in the dark, and the face said, "Did you forget him?" And I look around, and there I saw a crucifix with Jesus hanging on it. And then I said, because he was asking me, "Did you forget him?" And I said, no, I don't forget him. And then I walked out and didn't tell anybody. They never heard about what I wanted to do.
So was that the only time you thought about that?
No, there was another time before I became a prisoner of war. I decided to shoot myself because I didn't want to be a prisoner of Stalin. And a stupid corporal in the morning, in the early, he walked outside. We were sleeping under a tree, and 50 yards away was a street and full of Russians in the night. And then we were sleeping under this tree, and the corporal went out walking outside, and the Russians saw him and came in and said, "The Russians are coming." And that's when I woke up and ran out without my gun, and whoop, there was the guy who held a gun toward me. So I had no time.
Okay.
So God didn't want me, most likely, to kill myself. So
that brings up a very interesting idea. Did you ever discuss with your fellow soldiers about this, about what you would do if you were going to be captured? No, you never discussed this.
No.
Okay.
No, I never told. I tell it to you now, and I believe I wrote it in the book.
Yeah.